A very good morning, YouTube and Twitch fans out there, and welcome to another stream of A Pilot's Life live on the VATSIM network, flown with me, Captain Nabs, in the WestJet 737. Welcome aboard, guys, for another flight. Today's flight, she's going to be a long one. For those of you that don't remember from the last episode, we are currently sitting in, if I can find a better view, Orlando. Really not too many good views of this airplane that kind of cut that way. But anyways, we are in Orlando. There goes one of those people movers back and forth between the terminal and the concourse. And we are going back to home base for our flight today. And that is a long way because we are going all the way from Orlando to Vancouver. 2,300 miles, nearly 6 hours in the 737. This is not a short flight. This is about as long a flight as you can do in the 737. As it is, I think we're running pretty close to the maximum capacity here. The only thing is that I randomly generated the load in the 737, and it's a relatively light load today. It's about 108 passengers and 9.5 tons of cargo. It's not full to the brim, which is good because otherwise this airplane would be taking off at maximum weight. As it is, we're going to be pretty much taking full tanks of gas to make sure we get there with sufficient reserves. So that is our flight for today. Just a quick walkthrough. Of course, it's now March, as you guys probably know, so if I check my alert here, you'll see that I got my bank account credited with $314, so I'm now up to $950. Still earning my experience points pretty quickly, but I got a fair amount of money here. I don't think that's really enough to buy anything yet, though. Most of the other stuff, even a mobile phone, it's not quite enough to buy the mobile phone and keep my experience points progressing. Actually, I already own the mobile phone anyway, so it's kind of pointless. But in order to start becoming an investor and increasing the amount of income I make every month, regardless of whether I fly or not, I have to have at least $2,000 for the first level of investment. So it's going to be a little while before we get to that point. But yeah, that's where we are right now. After this Vancouver leg, we are going to be going up to Prince George, down to Puerto Vallarta, and up to Vancouver again. So we've still got about half the month's schedule to go here. Lots of legs still to go. So let's get this one underway because she's going to be a long one today. Alright, hopping in the flight deck of my trusty Boeing 737 here. And as always, I'm going to have my FS2 crew accompanying me to keep me company and help us operate the airplane a little bit more efficiently. So let's get this thing powered on here. Batteries on, looking good. Get some ground power, and that'll really bring all the systems to life with a source of electrical power. Emergency lights armed. Go up to the overhead panel. And there's the Mach warnings horn and flight test, flight recorder test. That looks good. And of course, we've got to start our IRSs aligning into nav mode. Let's just check and make sure we've got the position light still on. The seatbelts we don't want to have on because we are going to call the fuel truck at this point because we are going to need some fuel. So actually, one thing I didn't do, and it's one thing that bugs me a little bit about PMDG's airplanes, and it's not like a crazy end of the world kind of annoyance, but it's just one of those things. I wish they save so much other information about the airplane from one flight to the next. Why are we not saving the fuel level? You guys can't quite see that there unless I pop that down like that, but the fuel level was at full fuel, and first of all, very seldom are you going to ever use full fuel in most airliners. I mean, we need it today, but for those people that use GSX to simulate the time it takes to refuel an airplane prior to boarding the airplane, I think we'll also get catering today. These are things that saving the fuel from the previous flight makes it, I think, a little bit more realistic, and then you can choose the fuel load you need. And there's a lot of airliners that do that, so I'm surprised PMDG doesn't do that. They focus a lot on systems, but I guess it's just not on their list. I would think that would be a fairly easy thing. Consider the amount of data that gets saved from one flight to the next. All the service-based failure data that's saved in there. I'm surprised that that's not in there. But anyways. What do I know? Okay, so let's go ahead and just configure up the FS2 crew here. We are at a gate. We are going to use ASDX. We're going to do derated with assumed temperature takeoff. We'll see if we can do it with flap 5 today. There's some pretty long runways here. Let's see if we can do it. ETOPS no bleeds on, anti-ice is not required. Safety change, safety crew change, underweight. I would say force return, we're going to be overweight. SIDS, and I don't think this really makes a difference. A lot of this stuff doesn't make a difference except for actually playing the brief. But some stuff like the flaps and the power settings you do need to set. Alright, let's see here. I'm curious. Actually, before we even, yeah, let's do some takeoff calculations here today, guys. Just figure this out. Looks like winds are 350 at 14. So today we're going to be doing definitely a takeoff to the north. So I believe that would be 1-8 left, I think. Hold on. Let me just pull up my charts here on my other screen really quick. Come on, you can do it. Oh, for crying out loud. Why is it every time you go to use Navigraph, it always seems to be logged out on one of your devices? I have about 4 devices with Navigraph on it, and it always seems like one of them is logged out. I don't think they'd limit how many devices you can have. Imagine if they charged per device, so they'd make a lot more money. But I like the portability between the two different, you know, having it on my computer versus having it on my tablet. You know, it's nice to have both options. Okay, 3-6 right is what we're going to do. For departure, we don't need an intersection departure. It looks like a nice day. We're going to have a dry runway. Let's see here. Wind. Is it me or does that sound really loud to you guys? And actually, give me 1 second here because I seem to have a configuration problem here. Okay, there we go. We got the audio issue figured out. I don't know what was going on there. That was a little weird. I had to actually just reset the streaming software and it seemed to work at that point. So I haven't had that really happen too much. It's a little weird and I apologize for that delay. So let's get right back into it here. Alright, so we'll just say winds calm. Gives us kind of a best case scenario, and then the performance will probably be even better. 14 degrees and 3019. 30.19. Let's do, can we do takeoff 2? We probably can't do takeoff 2, so let's do takeoff 1, flap 5, AC on, anti-ice off, and our takeoff weight today is going to be pretty hefty. Just based on the flight plan alone, we are looking at a takeoff weight of 169,300. So let's do that. 169,300. Center of gravity of, I don't know, 22%. And let's calculate that. Alright, so we might have to flip to flap 10 and then calculate that. Flap 15. The weights actually go down, so there we go. It does have to be flap 15. Alright, so there you go. And let's do takeoff 1. Let's see if we can at least do derate there. Nope. So it's got to be full power takeoffs today. There we go. Select the temperature. We can do 35 though. Okay. Anyways, there is the performance calculation. So now we've got our performance data ready to go here. And with that, we're going to hop into the flight or into the FMS and actually start setting this up. And actually, the fuel guy has been bugging me for a little while here now. So during that time, oh, I never actually started the pre-flight, did I? I meant to do that.
Okay, let's get this show on the road.
Oh, don't take the bridge away, you stupid jerk. Okay, so I was hoping this was going to be a slick start to the stream, and it's not working that way at all. Okay, so we need, basically we need full fuel here. So let's pull this up, and if we set full, that's 46,000. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so they're going to do that. Catering is here, so I need my doors opened as well. And then we can hop into the FMS. That is a weird angle. I don't know why it's tilted so far down like that. That should be more like about there. There we go. And, alright, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here while I do it on my other screen. So we are going to go into FMC mode. And let's go position init. Next page. And I should actually check to make sure I do have the up-to-date data of 25th of March to 25th February, 25th March, so I do have the correct data. I should always check that because you never know when it's going to be expired somehow. Especially because that date passed not too long ago. I'm fairly sure I updated everything, but you never know. One of the reasons why it's always there is to give you that chance to check, and of course I just skip that half the time. WestJet 1711 is our flight number for the day, and just going to do a flight plan request because frankly it is a long flight. Let's see if we can just pull this in and get this going that much faster, especially with that little audio glitch that I had to fix. Give it a couple seconds and it should come back with a flight plan. There we go. Route uplink is ready. We can just load that. And it's already there. I forget, like a lot of other airplanes, it will say loading as long as it's doing it, and then the message will go away. But the 737, for some reason, it just the loading message comes up and never goes away. Alright, so we're expecting 36 right for departure. And I don't even know what SID to expect here. I don't normally go this way out of Orlando, and I think they're all vector SIDs out of Orlando anyways, aren't they? Yeah. We'll do the McCoy 2 departure. I think that's the one I've done in the past. To Guano, and then we get a vector over to Camden. And then let's just check the rest of that route there. What am I looking here for? Route button. There we go. Check the rest of this route here on my flight plan. So I've got my sim brief generated flight plan as always. I didn't pick the default route because I tried to pick an even shorter route to help cut the time down. Camden, Patoy, Q116 to Jaja. Direct MGM, direct Googie, direct Kimmel, direct MCI, which I know is Kansas City, direct Trial, direct HIA Metau, and then we join the Grizz arrival there at Metau. So estimated landing in Vancouver 1-3 is never going to happen, so I'll say ILS to 8 left, and so we'll say Grizz 6 to the 8s from Metau. And let's activate and execute that flight plan. Then we can do perf-init. And again, I'm going to check my flight plan here for the ZFW. It's estimated at 124.9. Cost index today I think is pretty high, 68. And we can always bump that up if the fuel will allow us. The reserve fuel, Comox is the alternate today, 26, and 22 would be 48. And the initial cruise altitude 320, we are going to have some step climbs in there as we burn off the gas and the airplane gets a little bit lighter. 271 at 48 for the average wind. And there we go. We can initialize that. N1, so we're going to be doing a takeoff 1, climb 1, and it was 35 was the performance calculation. Has to be flap 15, and takeoff C of G. And fee speeds unavailable. Does it think we're even heavier than we are? It looks like the FMS is up and it's not getting us fee speeds. So we may have to bump this down even further. Let's see here. Oops, where did I go? I pressed the wrong page here. So let's do N1 limit. And what if I take this down to 25? Is that going to be even enough to get me V speeds? No. So I think we're going to have to go with a takeoff 1. And then we'll get some V speeds. There we go. And 153 is the final speed, and we'll keep that in mind as we go back to the next step here, which is, of course, starting to set up the MCP.
Hi, the security and safety checks are all done. Are we good to start boarding?
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay.
Alright, so they're going to do boarding. Now that the airplane's all booted up, I can just test the stall warning system. 1 and 2, sounds good. Alright, again, pulling up my charts here in Orlando. Where are my Navigraph charts here? There they are. Alright, so it's climb. It's on the McCoy 2, climb on heading or it's a sign, cross 2 south of DME at or above 2300. Cross the Orlando radial at above 2600, cross Orlando 090 radial at or above 3000, and 5000 the top altitude. There is no heading assigned on there, so we're just going to put in runway heading, which is 005. So 005, 5000 for the altitude.
Okay, I'm back from the walk around. Everything looks good.
I'm going to get the flight directors on. And let's have a quick look here. Again, the altimeter setting 3019 here in Orlando. Oops, too far. There we go, 3019 and 3019. Alright, I believe catering is done, so I can probably close those doors now that I'm looking at them. Test the FMC callouts. Actually, I didn't turn on the traffic, so there's traffic. And we could probably arm. We'll leave the arming the autopilot for now. Let's test all the lights in the flight deck. Make sure no light bulbs appear to be burned out, because boy, there are a lot of light bulbs in this flight deck. And they all look good. We're going to go ahead and get RTO up there. Pull up the system page for a second, just check that the hydraulic fluids are good. Alright, look good. And I'll set the flight number on here as well. 1711. There it is. Get that parking brake on. Make sure we got Unicom ready to go here. And 2000 on the transponder, and I think we're just about ready to go. Fuel truck is done, he's all gone. Here comes the ramp guy now to load up the bags, so that's good, and the boarding should be starting. And I think we're just about ready for the briefing whenever this guy finishes his procedures. It takes him a little while because he's got lots of switches to flip around, but yeah, while he's doing that, let's have a quick look through the flight plan here and have a look at the note dams over here in Orlando today. Echo 1 between Echo Foxtrot closed, Foxtrot between Bravo and Charlie closed. And this is one of those things, and this is probably the biggest problem with the proliferation of EFBs for everything in the flight deck. It's great to sort of have one device that sort of does everything, and it reduces a lot of clutter in the flight deck in a way, but it also makes it very hard if you have your flight plan and your charts on the same device to be able to compare and look at these things and say, well, where are these NOTAMs? Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the airport. So Echo 1's over here, not a problem. Foxtrot between Bravo and Charlie closed. Foxtrot between Bravo and Charlie closed. Okay, that's fine. Foxtrot between Charlie and Echo 2 closed, so we definitely can't taxi along Foxtrot. We'll have to take Echo and probably Charlie down. Taxiway Charlie between Fox and Bravo 10. Because construction, lighted, barricaded. Okay, so we're going to take Bravo down. So there's just some construction happening in this section over here, so we'll avoid that. And then any NOTAMs regarding the SIDS. There's no NOTAMs regarding the SIDS. It's very easy to do it when you've got them side by side, but imagine if you had those on the same device, you have to flip back and forth between them. I understand why airlines are switching to using EFBs, and I like it a lot, but there's something nice about two pieces of paper that you can put side by side and compare them. Compare your approach chart to your flight plan. Otherwise, it makes very awkward and inconvenient to try and make that comparison. Try and, when there's 100 taxiways that are closed, trying to find where they are on your screen is just really frustrating anyways. Okay, just gonna have a quick look at the legs page here. So 500 feet, and then just continues on the 005 vector, and then eventually over to Guano. So hold on. What does the chart say here for departure? Vectors to Orlando 355 radial to Guano. Maintain 5,000. Yeah, so yeah, we're eventually gonna vector over to Guano. So it's in the flight plan anyways. We're probably gonna get turned before we do that. We've got no ATC online anyways. Alright, I don't think I tested my altitude mass. That's about the only thing left to test. There we go. Make sure my flight tracker's running as well while I'm waiting for this guy. Just doing it quickly on my other screen here. Getting this flight ready to go. Sounds like he's still throwing about 100 switches here. What is this guy doing over here? He's got fuel pumps now. Okay. There we go. Pre-flight checklist.
Pre-flight checklist. Oxygen.
Tested 100%.
Tested 100%. Navigation transfer and display switches. Normal. Auto. Window heat. On. Pressurization mode selector. Auto. Flight instruments.
Heading 194. Altimeter 3019er.
Checked. Parking brake.
Set.
Engine start levers.
Cut off.
Pre-flight checklist complete.
Are you ready for the departure briefing?
Go for it.
And actually, one thing I'm going to check, because I almost forgot about this, but last time, I didn't forget about this, but I almost forgot to reset it. We had a failure, and it looks like the failure's been reset because now there's no active failures. But we did have the failure of the pressurization system on the last flight, so I just wanted to make sure that that was reset. Okay, in which case we are ready to go here. All right, so I'm just going to pull it up here on my web browser here because it's just easier for now because I've already got it loaded up. So today we're going to be departing off of runway 36 right here in Orlando. We're over here at the airside 4. We're going to probably taxi out Echo 4, Echo, and then down Bravo to get to runway 36 right, or as otherwise instructed by ATC if they show up. The McCoy 2 departure is a departure for today, 20-3 Bravo, the 25th January 2019. DME radar required turbojets only. 36 and 35 left and right. Climb on heading as assigned. Cross 2 DME south of the Orlando VOR at or above 2300. Cross the Orlando 115 radial at or above 2600. Cross the 090 radial at or above 3000. So we can do this. I'm going to move this on the other screen so I can just see it, but we can do this here. Let's do it this way. If we do fix, all of these fixes are based on the Orlando VOR. North 28, West 81, yeah, that's the one. So we can do the 2 DME radial, or the 2 DME arc. And we have to do the 115 radial. And the 090 radial. Alright, so now, if we look at our screen here, and unfortunately we're facing the wrong way to see it, but I think you can see it here at the bottom. If I zoom out a little bit more on this, you'll be able to see it a little better, but there are our 3 radials. And the other thing I can do probably is go into plan mode. And hopefully that'll show me. Okay, so there we go. So, yeah. So we have to cross the 2DME radial at or above 2300, the 115 radial at above 2600, and the 090 radial at or above 3000. So I got all the radials drawn on there so we can help make sure we're meeting those requirements as we do the flight. And that's basically it for the charts. Terrain around Orlando, the highest sector altitude is 3000, all sectors, so that works. Weather is looks like a very nice day out there, no issues weather-wise. Terrain, operational. No NOTAMs affecting the departure process other than a few closed taxiways. No MELs on the aircraft. Everything appears to be functioning. The mechanics fixed that pressurization system since the last time we flew it. And, yeah, noise abatement is built into the SID, I believe. And immediate return. We're going to be overweight. We may have to burn some fuel to get down below the max landing weight. Any questions?
No questions.
Alright. I think we're just about done boarding, so let's go ahead and get that APU starting, and we'll be just about ready to go. So, you know, this is one of those airports too, and I was looking at this a little while ago. The level of detail at the gate is really quite something. There's a lot of very good texturing. The signs over here on the jet bridge on the GPU, obviously the transparent windows, you can actually see rows of chairs inside there. The windows and doors and the signage and piping and everything all along that wall, really quite detailed. And that's something that I find that developers kind of look at the airports often as like a uniform area that has to be kind of covered in the same level of detail at every point. And I would say that if you want to optimize the experience, you don't need to do that. What's actually better for optimizing the experience would be to have highly detailed areas near the gates where people are going to be spending, you know, 20, 30 minutes setting up their flights and probably looking out the window a fair bit and noticing the details or lack thereof. I've seen plenty of airports that are reasonably well detailed overall, but the textures are not great. When you get close to the buildings like you do here at the gate, you notice how bad the texturing is. This is Taxi to Gates KMCO, and it's really quite good. It's not perfect, but it's quite well detailed. They spent a lot of effort on quite a lot of detail in the gate areas, which is really where a lot of the detail needs to be, because that's where you're going to be up close to the scenery a lot. And I find it weird sometimes the areas that get attention from developers that you don't really see too much. Certainly the way people normally fly airplanes. Thank you. Alright, so we got the load sheet, so we're done boarding pretty much here, so we can start getting ready for departure. We are going to need to push off this gate, that's for sure. Here comes my my tow bar. Alright, and he changed the takeoff speeds. Speed's 152. It went down just a little bit. Oh, we're not ready yet. Give us a minute here.
Verify takeoff speeds.
Verified.
Check.
He's getting there, though. This guy's getting there.
Locking gear.
Where we get pushed to? We would probably get pushed over here. Oh, and there's somebody else taxiing out over there. That's probably where we would get pushed to for start. Alright. It sounds like they're still doing boarding. They're still finishing up the boarding. Give it another minute or so. Hopefully they'll be done here. And then we'll get underway on our long flight to Vancouver. This is taking about 15-20 minutes longer than I had anticipated, so it's going to be a longer stream than I anticipated. Just a quick check of my V-pilot. Yep, still no ATC down here in Orlando. pitied, but not unexpected. Although it is a weekend morning, so I would expect at some point we're going to get somebody out here. Not too much ATC on the VATSIM network at large right now, but I expect that will change as the day goes on. As the day gets a little older, I would expect that we're going to get some ATC online. I'm surprised there's very little so far. But the morning is young. We'll be online for many hours, so there's a very good chance that we will get ATC at some point in this process. Alright, just give me 1 second, guys. I just step away for one moment. Okay, there we go. Alright. I think the boarding is all done.
Hey guys, all passengers are on board. Are we clear to close?
Go for it. Go for it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, it'll be a short taxi.
Thanks, let me know if you need anything.
Before start checklist down to the line.
Before start checklist to the line. Fuel 46.1 thousand pounds. Pumps on. Passenger signs on. Windows.
Closed. Locked.
Locked. MCP.
Speed 152, heading 005, altitude 5,000. Altitude 5,000.
Checked. Takeoff speeds.
V1 144, VR 145, V2 152. V2 152.
Checked. CDU pre-flight.
Complete.
Completed. Rudder and aileron trim.
Checked and set. Set and checked.
Taxi and takeoff briefing.
Complete.
Before start checklist completed to the line.
Before start checklist below the line.
Flight deck door closed and locked. Anti-collision light on. Before start checklist complete.
Cockpit to ground. Cockpit to ground.
Go ahead.
Please disconnect external power.
Roger. Disconnecting the GPU.
Should have done that sooner. And then he hasn't removed the shocks yet either, possibly because the GPU was still connected. So let's see if
Captain, the GPU is disconnected.
Bypass been inserted.
thank you.
Release parking brakes. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Start sequence is 1, then 2.
Check.
Start engine 1.
Starting 1.
We now request your full attention as the flight attendants demonstrate the safety features of this aircraft. When the seatbelt sign illuminates, you must fasten your seatbelt. Insert the flat metal clip to the buckle and pull the loosen strap and tighten it up. To release your seatbelt, lift the
Alright,
upper
here we
portion of the
go.
buckle. We suggest that you keep your seatbelt fastened throughout the flight as we may experience turbulence. There are several emergency exits on this aircraft, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 2 over each wing. Please take a moment to locate the exit nearest you. In some cases, the exit may be behind you. If we need to evacuate the aircraft, floor-level lighting will guide you toward the exit. Doors can be opened by moving the handle in the direction of the arrow. Each door is equipped with an inflatable slide, which may also be attached and used as a life raft. Oxygen and air pressures are always being monitored. In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you. To start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you. Place it firmly over your nose and mouth, secure the elastic band behind your head, and breathe normally. Although the bag does not inflate, oxygen is flowing to the mask. If you are traveling with a child or someone who requires a
Starter cutout.
turn your mask on first
Check.
and then assist that other person. Keep your mask on until an uniformed crew member advises you to remove it.
Stable start.
In the event of an emergency, please assume the
Start
right
engine
position.
2.
Lean forward
Starting
with your
2.
hands on top of your head and your elbows against your sides. Ensure your feet are flat on the floor. A life vest is located
Waiting your confirmation for good engine start.
To inflate the vest, pull firmly on the red cord only when leaving the aircraft. If you need to refill the vest, blow into the mouthpiece. Use the whistle and light to attract attention. Also, your seat bottom cushion can be used as a flotation device.
Valves go open, fuel's flowing,
and hug the cushion to your chest.
and there goes light off.
We remind you that this is a non-smoking flight. Tampering with, disabling, or destroying the smoke detectors located in the lavatories is prohibited by law. You will find this and all other safety information in the card located in the seat pocket in front of you. We strongly suggest you read it before takeoff. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask one of our crew members. We wish you all an enjoyable flight.
Starter cutout.
Check. Stabilizing. We got a good start. You can go ahead and disconnect.
Unlocking gear.
Unusual Ben asks if I'm using VATSIM. It must be new to the stream because absolutely yes. I always, pretty much always try to fly on VATSIM, especially whenever I'm streaming. It adds such a real dimension. I've tried the traffic packages in the past. They add airplanes, but they don't add the radio chatter. I do like some of the traffic packages just for the idea of giving the airports a bit more of a populated feel, but
Left is clear.
they just don't do it for me. Flap 15.
Flaps 15.
Flight control check. After start checklist. After start checklist. Before taxi checklist. Before taxi checklist.
Before taxi checklist.
Thank you.
Generators on. Probe heat on. Anti-ice off. Isolation valve auto. Engine start switches continuous. Recall checked. Auto brake RTO. Engine start levers.
Idle detent.
Flight controls
Checked.
dispatch clearance
Checked.
checked. Before taxi checklist complete.
Clear on the left.
Clear right.
Set taxi light to on.
Taxi light on.
Orlando traffic, good morning. WestJet 1711 is at airside 4, taxiing for departure runway 36 left. Alright, farewell sunny skies of Orlando, back to Canada, where winter is still out there in force, although it is March, so winter should be ending as these streams continue now. And Unusual Ben, well, thank you very much for watching the stream on Twitch. I appreciate it. Yes, I always do try to fly on VATSIM. I find the level of realism goes up when you're dealing with real people. And that's something that computers just cannot really simulate effectively, is real people. As silly as that sometimes sounds, the kind of stuff that people will do, but also the infinite variables of different people with different training techniques. When you tend to write things for computers, you tend to sort of dumb it down to specific scripts that sort of simulate the average of what people do, but you can't really simulate the variation in people, different training levels, different experience levels, even different cultures. You know, people who learn to fly in North America versus learning to fly in Europe or Asia will operate in very different ways because of what they've been taught and exposed to. So yeah, you can't beat the realism on VATSIM, and especially when you deal with real people as controllers that can really change what they're doing based on the situation. It's very hard for me to ever perceive a script that will really quite match the human level of ATC. The only thing that's unfortunate about flying on VATSIM is the lack moods. Yeah, absolutely. Different people will be in different moods. Sometimes people will be happy about what's going on, and sometimes they won't. Absolutely, that's just another variable right there. And yes, the downside, of course, is that you won't get traffic all the time. It'll be quiet a lot of the time in a lot of places you fly.
And is secure.
But when you can find those events to participate in, oh man, just the level of realism. And I'll talk about that when we get going here, but there was one yesterday that I got a chance to participate in, and it was just tons and tons of fun. Alright, so the right turn here, 3-6 left, just on the other side of those trees there. Let's get going a little faster here. Orlando is one of those really scenic airports. Not that I think it's necessarily intentional completely, but there's a lot of landscaping within the airport. There's a lot of areas that were left kind of somewhat natural with the trees and water still around. Somewhat natural. I don't claim that it's completely natural by any means, but somewhat naturalized. Some airports are just literally concrete jungles, so it's nice to see an airport that actually has some flora and fauna in it. But this was also one of the airports that really was not space constrained. It is a little bit now in that now it's completely surrounded, but it's a very large property as well. It's not like some of the major airports that are crammed into very small amounts of space. Yeah. And that's the thing about VATSIM ATC. Unusual Ben said he's watching ground ATC VATSIM stream last night at Heathrow, and you could hear the difference between 5 planes and 20 planes. And yeah, absolutely, your pace picks up when you get more planes on the screen, because things do need to happen in a more regular way. But at the same time, it's part of the fun. I did a stream on Friday night, and it was pretty quiet, especially the first hour or so. It was very quiet. I only had a couple of planes all together. And then as the night wore on, eventually we finally got some airplanes to show up, and then it got quite busy. And that's the fun part, I think, when it gets busy, when you have to keep that tone up. When you have to be constantly working on the next thing. When there's not much happening, it's almost easier to let things get away from you, if that makes any sense at all. Alright, so this is Bravo right here, so we're going to make the left turn on Bravo. But and the same is true in the real world. When it's busy, when things are really working hard, it's easier to focus on the task at hand. When it's not really enough to keep your attention fully and keep you busy fully, it's very easy to become distracted and complacent because not enough stuff is happening. So when there's not a lot of traffic online, the other typical example for pilots, and ask any pilot, with even just a couple hundred hours of experience, and they'll tell you which landings work out better, the ones on the smooth, calm wind days or the ones where it's nice and gusty. And almost invariably, the pilots will tell you that the gusty approaches often lead to better landings, and the calm days lead to some of the worst landings. Because the calm days lull you into that sense of calm, that sense of, oh, everything's fine, it's going to be great, I don't have to really do too much. And what often happens is you get so comfortable and sort of, I hate to say in a trance, but yeah, you sort of get into a little bit of a trance that you almost don't react to things. And then when you suddenly have to rotate...
Orlando traffic, good morning, American 1315, airside 2, push and start.
Or when you suddenly have to flare, all of a sudden you're not reacting very quickly because you've been lulled into this calmness. Whereas when it's gusty and you're working really hard, doing everything to keep the airplane focused right on that center line, you tend to have the nicer landings because you're so focused on the job at hand. Before takeoff checklist.
Before takeoff checklist. Flaps.
Flaps 15, green light.
Stabilizer trim.
5.5 upset. 5 upset. Set and checked.
Before takeoff checklist complete.
It wasn't set perfectly, but it was very close, so I just gave it a little nudge there just to give it, should have been just below 5. Orlando traffic, WestJet 1711, taking position runway 36 right for departure, McCoy 2 departure, left turn in. Before takeoff procedures.
Check.
It's nice to have this FO do most of the work for me. I really have become almost dependent upon FS2 crew. I can fly this airplane by myself, but I'm really bad at it now, because I'm used to him doing most of the system's flows.
Ready to go.
Alright, we're clear for takeoff. Gonna get the landing lights on. Alright, and before I actually hit the power, the one thing I want to check, of course, is make sure that my streaming software, or my tracking software is running here. Yes, it's got the end flight button up there. Okay, just want to make sure of that, because it wouldn't be the first time that I tried to do a flight and the tracking was not running the way it should. Stable. Check thrust. Takeoff.
Check.
Helps by arm the auto thrust, I guess. There we go.
Thrust set. knots.
Checked.
Rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up. Heading select.
Check.
Orlando traffic, American 1315, airside 2, will be taxiing to 35 left via Gulf.
Set speed 230.
Speed 230. Set.
Flaps 5.
Flaps 5.
Flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
There's the 3,000 foot restriction already made.
Checked.
Traffic. Traffic.
Flaps up.
Flaps up.
Select Command A.
Command A.
Alright, there we go. We got the autopilot back on. We're above 3,000. There's no ATC online still, so we're just going to go right to our first fix on our flight plan here. I'll nav that.
1,000 to level.
We're going to denav that, and we're going to start cranking this up here to our initial cruise of 32. Alright, there's 32. It's going to accelerate 250, and then it's going to keep on climbing. And there we go, we're underway. After takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Engine bleeds. On. Packs. Auto. Landing gear. Up and off. Flaps. Up. No lights. After takeoff checklist complete.
Checked. Right now I'm just on VATSIM Unicom on 22.8, so why is it throttling back? It shouldn't be leveling off here.
Happy to race the cabin crew.
There it goes. Go for it.
Okay.
I'm on Unicom, so you'll hear people on the ground and in the air, so anybody around the airports. Speaking of which, Orlando traffic, WestJet 1711 is airborne now, westbound after departing runway 36 left, climbing through 5,000. 36 right, I guess we departed. Not really relevant anyways. Point is that I'm airborne. Alright, and I think we're flying more or less just past downtown Orlando. I think that's I-5 there, I think, so Orlando is somewhere, downtown Orlando is somewhere here. If you didn't have the clouds in there, you can see it. And I think we're going to fly just to the north of Disney here. Just kind of in this area on the west side of Orlando. This is where Disney World is. I don't know how well the scenery's done in P3D, but it's there, somewhat. If that is I-5, then it's kind of in this area here. Pity the clouds are there today, because I would love to see it. I'm sure they must have put some of the landmarks in there. The sphere from Epcot Center, and probably the Cinderella's Castle, Magic Kingdom. I would imagine they put those there. Those are pretty famous landmarks, and it's funny because you really cannot fly over them in real life, so if you want to fly over them, the sim is the place to do it. Disney's very sensitive about people flying over their property. How are we doing here? There's 10,000, and there goes the lights. Excellent. Get those off.
Okay to release the cabin?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see if Disney World's out there. It must be to some degree behind these clouds. We're probably not there yet because it looks like this is still a somewhat built up area, and Disney is very much it's a very specific kind of not built up area. Well, let's do this actually too. We can do this. If I bring in my Sim Toolkit Pro here, and go to my live map, kill my frame rate, murder my processor, but hey, this could be part of Disney World here. Okay, so let's go zoom in, zoom way in here. No, not that far in, but oh, we just passed it actually. It was a beam us to the south right there, so we're kind of a little bit north of it. Right about there, I think, is where Disney World is. I know I'm a little bit obsessed, but I still think it's one of the best vacation spots on Earth. Not the only good vacation spot, but one of the best. Definitely. Alright, now that we're above 10,000, we're actually accelerating. Our cost index here today is pretty high. It was, I think, 68. That's going to get us to Vancouver with 10.3 when we only need about 5.5 for a reserve, so we can bump it up even more if we needed to.
Orlando traffic, Frontier 1031 lining up at 35 left.
But I don't think we really need to because we're already almost redlining it here as it is. So one thing we can do though while we're in the climb here is go in here and let's load up some winds because that'll impact our arrival time into Vancouver. It is going to be a long flight and the winds are not going to be helping us. There's going to be two separate waves of wind. There's one that's going to be kind of in the next hour or so as we cross out of Florida into, I think, Georgia, Mississippi.
Orlando traffic, Frontier Flight 1031, taking off, 35 left, west of departure.
Cruise upwind, ready. And execute that, and that will that cut about a couple 100 pounds out of our arrival fuel, 2048. That's not too bad. It's still a long time from now, though. 5.5 hours to go. feel like that, maybe it's just me and my headset, but it feels like that background sound of the 3.7 is pretty noisy today. I may crank that volume, that background volume down just a little bit there, just to sort of take the edge off it. Because it's going to be a long time of listening to that whooshing sound. Alright, there we go. We are airborne. We're just about through 180. Looks like we're going to make it, make this turn at Camdot, however you want to say it. And level off about halfway to Patoy. And then when we get level and cruise, we'll spend some time chatting about a number of different topics. I got a few things that I want to talk about today. Some things that are kind of exciting, and some other things that are a little, maybe not as exciting, but nevertheless, find some stuff to talk about. And of course, if anybody who's watching out there has any questions, just let me know. I'm always ready and willing to answer questions about aviation in general. But yeah, you can still hear people departing Orlando. Orlando is one of those popular places as well. Oh, there's transition. Thank you for that prompt. Orlando is one of those kind of perpetually popular places on the VATSIM network. It's funny, there's certain places that people just get like a mental idea of them being like an important destination, an airport they want to visit a lot, and they end up being popular places. And JFK is one of them. Heathrow is one of them. So Unusual Ben says, "Hi, if I have no ATC to hand me off, how do I find out for the next ARTCC?" Well, that's a very good question. How do you know if there is ATC on the VATSIM network? Well, the first thing and the easiest thing is to look in your vPilot window when you're flying and just make sure that there's no frequencies popping up here on the in-range list. If you see any controllers popping up on the in-range list, that doesn't necessarily mean you should be calling them. That just means that you're within range of their radio transmitters. Depending on where you are, of course, will determine whether or not you're actually going to need to talk to them. Some people have a very high range, and this is a bit of an issue. Sometimes the controllers, people very far away, will call up and ask for service, and you'll tell them, no, you're not actually within my space. And some of them, most people understand it, but occasionally you get someone who doesn't. They repeatedly ask for service, and it's like, you're 500 miles from my airspace, but because of the shape of my airspace, I need a large radio coverage. So you'll see me on your list, but it doesn't matter, because you're not actually in my airspace. So that's the first thing you do, is check the vPilot to see if anybody's online. Then the second thing you can do is actually check some of these trackers. So Sim Toolkit Pro here actually does offer this. I can't really show it now too much, but I can a little bit there. This light blue section here at the top, this is Chicago Center up here. Chicago Center's online. So any online centers, there's another one down here at San Juan. Any online centers will appear in blue. So you can keep track of it on your flight, and it will draw the boundaries reasonably accurately that you'll be able to see when you're approaching the boundary for another ARTCC and give them a call. If you don't have Sim Toolkit Pro, and I highly recommend you get it, it's a little bit processor intensive. It's the only complaint I have about it, is that it does tend to penalize a bit of your processor time, especially when you're using the movie map mode. That tends to use up a lot of processor power, which is not entirely surprising or unexpected. That's kind of what you would expect. So I'm not at all, like I said, I don't hold it against them per se, but if there was kind of a downside to Sim Toolkit Pro, it's that it is a little bit processor intensive. If I pull up my task manager right now, it is the second thing on my list here behind P3D itself, and it's using about 6 to 8% of my processor power here just to keep this movie map going. If I close the movie map, it gets a lot better. Then it tends to stay down in the 5% range, 4 or 5% range. Or you can use a utility such as VATSPY. So if I launch my VATSPY, I don't normally launch it on my streaming computer, but I'll do it for the sake of answering this question. There it is, it's running, and there's VATSPY. So again, VATSPY is doesn't necessarily keep track of your aircraft per se, but it shows you all the online sectors, and you can see roughly where the boundaries are. They're not always perfect, but it certainly gives you an idea of when you should call. So here we are. So we are well inside of the Jacksonville ARTCC, and we're going to be in there for quite a while now. Eventually, I think we're going to pass into Atlanta and then Memphis Center. If in doubt, ask. If you're not sure, if you're in somebody's airspace on VATSIM, just ask by text. Most people will be more than happy to say, yes, you're inside my airspace, yes, you're passing close by, no, you're not anywhere near my airspace. Let's see here. One thing I can probably do now that we are almost up to cruise here and we're well done with our departure is I can clear out this fix from the departure. We don't need that information anymore. Yeah, if in doubt, ask. Most controllers would be more than happy to tell you whether or not you're inside their airspace, because they'd rather have you call when you're not inside their airspace than not call when you... They'd rather have you call when you're not in their airspace, and they can tell you that, than not call when you actually need to be on their frequency, and maybe you're causing a problem because you're not on their frequency. So, if in doubt, ask. But you also start to learn after a while where some of these transition points are, especially on your more common routes that you maybe fly more often. This is not a route I know well, so I will have to keep track of it on VATSIM and SimToolkit Pro to see who's online. I don't expect much for the first kind of part of this flight because it's still morning, but I expect as we kind of pass off into afternoon and evening times, we'll probably start to get a fair bit of ATC. I guess it won't really be evening, but... How would you do it in a real flight if you missed a handoff and no one has requested flight tracking? That's a really good question. How do you deal with a missed handoff and perhaps you've run out of radio range of the controller you're with? And this happens. Not totally unusually. It could be the controller's fault, it could be the pilot's fault, it could be that the controller has forgotten to hand you off, or they handed you off on the radar screen and then they got distracted by something else and they forgot to change you to the next frequency. And it definitely happens. It could be that the pilot, for whatever reason, was not listening. Whatever conversation you're having in the flight deck was really intense, you're really enjoying it, talking about a really good movie, or what you did last weekend that was really fun, and nobody was really listening very carefully to the radio and missed some radio calls. Or it could be that you happen to be just sort of somewhere on the edge of the range and you can't really hear them very well because of where you are. So the answer to that is something called guard frequency, which a lot of VATSIMers are probably not familiar with, a lot of sim enthusiasts are not familiar with, but in the real world, 121.5 is the, you may be familiar with it as the emergency frequency, the Mayday frequency. So 121.5, they call it the guard frequency because every airplane flying out there should normally be guarding that frequency, should be monitoring that frequency on their second radio if they're not talking to somebody else specifically with their second radio. If you're calling up company to tell them what time you're going to get to the gate at or make some extra requests for service, fine. That's great, but most of the time airline pilots are monitoring 121.5 on their second radio, and that way and that does a couple things. First of all, if there ever is an emergency and someone is trying to get a hold of people, someone to help them, and they can't reach anybody directly through a ground station, then they can get relayed through one of the many airplanes passing overhead. What's more commonly used for the guard frequency is just that, is lost pilots. Yeah, I mean, you can squawk 7700, but sometimes you actually need some assistance. You want to tell people where you are, not just squawk 7700, tell them the nature of the emergency. So trying to get a hold of somebody with guard can be useful if you don't know who to talk to. So every ATC facility in, I know in North America anyways, always has the guard frequency open, 21.5 open, so they can hear anybody that calls on that frequency. And most pilots will have it open. And the other reason why is that, let's say you're talking on a really busy frequency and you suddenly have an emergency and you can barely even get a word in. You can switch to the guard frequency, and because nobody else is talking on that frequency, the ATC facilities will be able to hear you and talk to you on that frequency. And on the flip side of that, again, the pilots can also, or ATC can also communicate with pilots directly if they don't know what frequency they're actually on. So your COM 1 radio, you didn't get switched over in time, you flew out of range, and you can't hear these guys, the controllers on your number 1 radio anymore. But if you've got number 2 up on 21.5, you're almost always within range of some radio station. And so the next facility will probably try and call you on that, and they'll say, WestJet 1711. This is Jacksonville Center on guard, switch now to Jacksonville Center frequency, blah, blah, blah. And you'll hear that a fair bit. You'll hear that usually a couple times a day where someone gets misplaced, someone gets lost, and without knowing what frequency their primary frequency is, as long as everyone's listening on the number 2 on 21.5, there's not a lot of communication happening on it, but if everybody's listening to it as a party line, anybody can get a hold of almost anybody within range, as long as they're listening on that frequency. So yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why to monitor 21.5. Sometimes even company aircraft will relay messages on 21.5 to company aircraft from ATC. So ATC may ask someone to, hey, this guy's out of range, can you try and reach them and get them, and see if you can get a hold of them and ask them to call me on this frequency. So there's all sorts of different ways to do it. Also, stuck mics. If there's a stuck mic on a certain busy frequency and nobody can talk anymore, oftentimes they'll use 21.5 to say, hey, everybody on such and such frequency, there's a stuck mic on this frequency, everyone check your mic. So hopefully whoever's got the stuck mic will realize it, but usually the people with the stuck mics are not monitoring guard either. All sorts of stuff. It's a great party line. It's a backup communication channel that almost everybody is on. There's not really much communication happening on it, but if something happens and you do need to get a hold of somebody and you can't get a hold of them through the primary radio, almost every airline pilot out there is always monitoring guard on number 2, and most other commercial operations. When we used to do charters, we would always be monitoring guard on 21.5. I have had it happen to a couple coworkers. I had a coworker that was almost intercepted. That was minutes away from being intercepted by fighters because they had missed a handoff on frequency, and they had gone 40-something minutes without talking to ATC, and I guess they were having a chat and they were not realizing that it was quiet and nobody was talking until finally somebody got a hold of them on guard, and thank goodness they did, because they were literally, the guys were running to the fighter jets to go and try and intercept them and see if they had perhaps passed out, you know, in the flight deck. So yeah, if you want to be a professional, monitor guard 21.5. Usually you don't have to do it so much in local areas. Oftentimes when you're at airports, you're busy with number 2 is often for ramp frequencies, company frequencies, communications like that. But a lot of companies, it's 10,000 feet. Above 10,000 feet, you'll have guard up all the time while you're cruising along, just in case you miss something. There you go. And now we're level at 320 on the first cruise altitude here. Just going to have a quick look here. I got a couple of step climbs planned out today. The first one's going to be at KMCO 340. Let's see, where's KMCO here? KMCO 1642. So about an hour and 20 minutes from now, we'll be at our first step climb. And if you weren't sure, you could always look at your chart, or again, I can also pull up, and I just love having this as a utility because sometimes it's just so helpful. Pull up your Sim Toolkit Pro. All your points on your flight plan loaded from SimBrief are marked on here. It's thinking. Give it a second. And where's KMCO? That's actually not marked on here because I'm zoomed out too much. If I take off the follow me, then I can scroll along my route. There's Googie. There's KMCO. So somewhere just north of Memphis is where we're going to do our first step climb of the day. I like to have the follow me on most of the time. So Unusual Bend asks, do we normally use 21.5 as the primary channel for emergency communications if we do a Mayday or pan-pan? Normally, no. Normally, if you're talking to an ATC facility, you want to continue talking and communicating directly with that facility. So normally you would make your Mayday call on your COM1 frequency, your normal communication frequency with that sector. You would save 21.5 more, again, for a time where you don't know who to talk to. So kind of an example of that might be if you're kind of coming off the ocean and maybe you haven't been given a VHF frequency yet. Then you might, and then you have an emergency, you might make the Mayday call on that. Or if you are not talking to ATC, so not so much IFR, but if you're VFR traffic and you're flying around somewhere between 2 airports and then you suddenly have an emergency and you want to get a hold of somebody quickly, then you'll pull up 21.5 and make a Mayday call on there. But certainly normally as an airline pilot or any kind of commercial pilot, you would just, whatever, anytime you're flying IFR, let me put it that way. If anytime you're flying IFR, whatever your primary frequency is, that is the frequency you would use to communicate with, communicate your emergency with ATC and coordinate the response, because they're the ones who already know all about you, know what you're doing, know where you are, and you're in their airspace, they'll know the most efficient way to deal with you. You know, if you have an emergency, if you have smoke in the flight deck all of a sudden, they'll know the closest airports. They'll know ones that have crash, fire, rescue, emergency services available, so they'll be able to suggest to you good airports to land at nearby. Doesn't happen too often, but it has happened. Never happened to me, fortunately, but I've been in a couple companies where there have been a couple of smoke emergencies and people have made emergency landings. One was at the destination because it happened as they were sort of entering the Tracon, so it's like, well, let's just continue quickly to our... Actually, only was the destination. I think they diverted to the bigger airport than the Tracon. And then the other time it was halfway down a flight, and they ended up diverting to a small airport in, I won't say the middle of nowhere, but in a relatively rural area. But yeah, the other option was, you know, to continue flying 20 to 30 minutes in any direction. And when you have smoke or fire in an airplane, you don't want to continue flying in any direction. You want to find the closest airport that when you, at the rate you're going to descend, you're going to get down there safely and hopefully still have some emergency services when you get there. I think the average lifespan of an airplane, when there's a fire on board, smoke and fire on board, is 12 minutes. 12 minutes is the average amount of time that airplane will remain flyable for. So yeah, the second you smell smoke, you have a fire reported in the airplane anywhere outside of the engines. The engines actually are probably one of the best places to catch fire in an airplane because the engines are designed to contain a fire. So ironically, the engine is probably the best place to actually burn. But anything in the cabin itself, it's a dire emergency, and it's an emergency descent, land as quickly as possible situation. Coming up to the end of the Florida Panhandle. All right. If you want a little bit more, yeah, 12 minutes. That's the average. Anyway, that's the average. So yeah, the absolute priority, regardless of almost anything else, when there's a fire or smoke in an airplane, is just land the airplane somewhere and get out, because you don't know if you're going to be above or below that average too. But that's the average. Do ARTCCs or ATC centers have alternate reserve channel for what is PP or MD for limited voice traffic? Oh, that's an excellent question. Yeah, will the centers have an alternate channel for Maydays and Pan-Pans to reduce the amount of traffic? Usually the opposite. Usually the opposite will occur if there is an emergency and an aircraft declares a Mayday. Usually the first thing that, but depending on the nature of the emergency, but certainly if it's anything critical where the airplane's going to need a lot of attention, what will usually happen at that point is all the other airplanes on that frequency will get dumped to another frequency. So the priority is to minimize the workload on the airplane having the emergency, so keep them on the frequency they're on for as long as you can without changes, and then dump any other airplanes you have to another frequency, to another controller if you need the frequency to be cleared out. So yeah, usually the other way around. Keep the emergency airplane on their current frequency. The only usually changes you'll probably get at that point is if you actually do pass another facility's airspace or getting switched over to tower, because tower is an on-radar situation. It's a very different facility than the en route facilities, but you might get switched once to like the Tracon and then once again to the tower, but they will minimize the changes of the frequency changes you get when you have an emergency. They'll try to keep the airplane on the same frequency as much as possible, within reason, of course. If there's, obviously if you're out of range of a transmitter or whatever, they'll do what they have to do, but yeah, the idea is to get rid of other airplanes and minimize your workload, because most of the time in this airline business, the workload's relatively light when you get up in cruise. There's not a whole lot happening. There's some talking on the radio, occasional fuel and navigation checks. That's about it. Monitor the systems. You're just sitting here watching things happen, but nothing terribly critical. So, frequency change, an extra frequency change or two is not going to really overwhelm people who don't have an emergency. Yeah, exactly. Reduces workload, doesn't, and so you're hopefully, and of course with a frequency change, especially in an emergency, you've always got the risk that someone gets it wrong. one of the more interesting things to do is if you go back, I don't know if you've ever read it, but I can't even think of the name of the book now, but Captain Sully's book there about his landing in the Hudson. If you go and read the transcript, listen to the audio and or read the transcript of that flight, you'll see that both the controller and the pilots got the flight number wrong more often than they got it right. They did all manner of combinations of the digits of the flight number, and nobody cared because they knew who they were freaking talking to. But you know, when there's an emergency, those are the kind of things that you're not necessarily going to be able to think of that carefully. There's so much going on in your brain, and your brain's working so overtime. You know, switching numbers around in a flight number is pretty common. And yeah, it's funny, you go, I never noticed it until someone pointed it out, and then you go and you read that transcript, and yeah, the flight numbers are all over the map in terms of what the guys said to each other. And I mean, it didn't matter. That everyone knew who they were talking to. Everyone knew who was talking and who was talking to who, so it didn't matter if they got the flight number right or not. But it just goes to show you how things like a random assortment of numbers can be easily mishmashed, get out, you know, in the wrong order, especially when you're distracted by other much more important tasks. So a frequency change too could do the same thing. You know, call me now on 135.62 and you put in 132.56 or something. You know, like it very easy to kind of flip a couple of numbers around and get lost on the wrong frequency too. So another reason to kind of minimize frequency changes as much as reasonably possible. It's a neat topic of conversation though. Dial this up here. So there's Kimmel. So that's Memphis, just south of Kimmel. So that's where we do our first change. Yeah, I don't think anybody really believed it when he said it the first time, because it happens periodically. You know, aircraft have in-flight shutdowns of engines, and it's usually a non-event. And I think part of it too is the tone of voice. I can't remember if it was Skiles or if it was Sully that was on the radio, but the tone was so calm in their radio calls. That it didn't sound like it was a life or death situation, because they were consummate professionals. They maintained, you know, on the inside probably their stomachs completely fell out of their bodies, but on the outside they maintained that calm professional demeanor. They were talking on the radio professionally and trying to do their best to do as much as they could in a short period of time. And yeah, they understood engine failure, but they didn't realize dual engine failure. Yeah, it also goes to a little bit of expectancy as well. Nobody expects to hear, you know, an Airbus say, "Yep, we've lost both engines." No, just nobody expects to hear that. You know, oh, we've had one engine shut down. The odds of losing two engines in flight, like that is truly a 1 in a million situation. I mean, even losing one engine in flight is you know, is almost a 1 in a million situation at this point with the reliability of engines. Maybe not so much in the 777s these days, but yeah, the one time you try to do it exactly like you train. But I'll be honest, we do very little. There's very little training for dual engine failures. There's a lot of training for losing one engine, but the dual engine failure is such a remote possibility. It's considered to be essentially not possible. There's only pretty much two scenarios where you would lose both engines in an airplane. One would be some kind of FOD ingestion into the engine, whether it be birds, ice, water, something affecting both engines. The only other thing probably would be a fuel problem, and if you had or fuel starvation. It's about the only thing. Otherwise, the engines are two completely independent units. You know, they look the same and they act the same, but actually, when you fly these airplanes for real, you'll see that some engines are new, some engines are old, some engines have been replaced, and some engines run. You know, they don't run like this, like almost in sync with each other on most airplanes. Usually there's some variation between them. One will be running at 600 degrees and one will be running at 670 degrees. The power settings won't be quite the same. They're completely independent units, and the only things that they would have in common is what goes into them. The fuel and the air. And if something bad goes into them, that's about the only way that you could end up losing two engines at the same time. So it's considered such a remote possibility. It's not something that's trained for, really. There is checklists and there are procedures for it, but most of the training is spent dealing with a single engine failure. And yeah, if I had $1 for every time I've had a single engine fail in the sim, be a rich man. Be a rich man just for doing it in one sim session. Alright, well I don't think we're getting Jacksonville today. I think we're going to be at the end of the Jacksonville airspace in another 10-15 minutes here. Cut the small corner of Atlanta and then up through Memphis. Kansas City, I'm not sure if we'll cut through Minneapolis at all. Denver, Salt Lake, Seattle, and eventually Vancouver. Oh look, we got Vancouver Tower online already. Doubt he's going to be there in the 5 hours when we get there. Alright, so let's just have a little look-see. We got 9.8 here. If I bump this cost index up to 100, and it gets me there pretty much about the same time, say 2 or 3 minutes maybe. It's not going to make a big difference to the bottom line at this point. We're already almost at maximum speed. How much faster can you really go? So yeah, this is the first of our waves of wind here. If I pull up my flight plan and go down to the end here, we've got the wind charts. These are really great. So this one is flight level 390. That's a little bit above where we are. 340 is really pretty much where we are. So you can see as we're kind of leaving Florida here, we've got our first 50, 60, 70 knots of wind here as we kind of cross over out of Georgia even and get in Atlanta Center, get into Memphis Center here. We're going to have some fairly calm winds across a lot of the mid part of the country here. And then as we get back up into the Pacific Northwest, we're going to start to get almost peaking at almost 100 knot crosswind here. So that'll penalize our performance a little bit there. Unfortunately, it's winter and you get the strong westbound winds. Or the strong eastbound winds. When you're traveling westbound, it adds a lot of time to these flights. If you were to take away the wind, it probably would easily slice an hour off of this flight if we didn't have that wind pushing against us today. No, with Sully it was the geese essentially. Yeah, they flew through a flock of Canadian geese and it went into both engines. It's about the only thing you really can't do much about is, you know, I mean, I've never seen too many flocks of birds up at altitude, but I've seen plenty near airports, but even then, seldom do you see like a whole flock of birds. You'll see like a couple here and there, but to see a whole flock of birds to have them go through the engine like that, yeah, it was just bad luck to happen to take off and fly just right at that moment, try to occupy the same space as a fleet as a flock of geese heading probably south for the winter. I don't even know, it was January I think it was, so I don't know where they were. I don't know where they were heading or why they weren't already somewhere further south, but yeah, as far as I know it was just geese that just caused both engines to fail. You know, they weren't that high up though. They were what, 3, 4, 5,000 feet? You'll get like flocks of certainly some of these larger migratory birds, you know, they will be up to easily altitudes of 10,000 feet. So 3 to 5,000 feet, we think of birds as being, you know, kind of mostly earthbound, and a lot of the time they are, but if they're trying to make long distances, they'll definitely be up a little higher. So it's definitely not unusual. It is a little more unusual to see them a little higher, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility anyways. Now you got me curious. Let's see here. Yes, they reached an altitude of 3,000. They struck the birds at an altitude of 2,800 feet, and they reached an altitude of 3,000 feet before they started going back down. So yeah, it was only 3,000 feet. That was the biggest issue, was that they didn't have altitude. Like they told him to turn around and go back to LaGuardia. And he's like, I'm not going to make it back to LaGuardia from here. You know, 3,000 feet in an Airbus will not get you that much of a glide. They're high efficiency wings, but they're not designed for gliding. That's for sure. That's okay. You know what? Honestly, that was a long time ago now. When was that? That was 2009. So that's 12 years ago. Wow. Where has the time gone? It was 12 years ago. So, I mean, it's a long time ago now, unfortunately. It's not ancient history, but it's certainly the stuff of legends in the aviation industry. And interesting sometimes to think and hypothesize what could have happened if you know, different pilots had been at the controls. You'd like to think that a lot of people would have made a good decision and hopefully brought the airplane down safely, but at the end of the day, I think in that case, Sully made the best choice that he could with the situation he was faced with. I don't think he could have done anything better. He thought about going to Teterboro, looked at it, made a quick mental calculation, and said, we don't have the glide ratio to make it there. And he did the best thing he could. Do you think other people would have done the same thing? And at the end of the day, the answer probably is no. Everyone probably would have reacted a little differently, and even having a different FO could have affected the dynamic of the whole thing. It's a team effort. You know, everyone gives Sully all the credit, but it really is a team effort when you're in the flight deck trying to get things done. I read his book. I read about the investigation. I did watch the movie. The movie was okay. The one thing we always learn is never travel with Tom Hanks, because he never has good luck when he's traveling. But it was okay. I mean, it's an interesting movie because there's an artificial attempt to create conflict with the NTSB, because there has to be conflict in a movie, or else the movie is boring. It's a great story, but it doesn't really lend itself well, the actual real story, lend itself well to movie making, because it was over in like 5 minutes too. Even the Mayday episode would have to really draw it out. But yeah, it's interesting to think, like, would other people, you know, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't played out a similar scenario in my mind, you know, over the years, and wondered if I could have, should have, would have reacted the same way and done the same thing and had the same outcome. It really is, you know, everyone survived the flight. It really is the best outcome you could hope for in that situation. Yeah, never fly with Tom Hanks, never go to space with Matt Damon. You got it. That is exactly right. And yeah, don't go to space with Tom Hanks. Yeah, just never travel with Tom Hanks is the general, because you don't want to go with him. You don't want to go with him in Apollo. You don't want to go with him in a FedEx flight over the ocean. You don't want to go with him. You don't want to take off from LaGuardia in an Airbus with him, and you also don't want to go. You don't want to go on a boat where he's the captain, because that also didn't turn out well. So never travel with Tom Hanks. Anywhere, never travel. He has made some good movies, though. Now, one of the other things that I did want to talk about today, because it's got me a little bit excited, is the fact that Aerosoft has now announced a release date for their CRJ, and this has definitely got me excited. I am thinking to myself that I will probably be a day one, let's get this airplane up in the air and let's try it out kind of guy. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, I forget what day, I think it's March 15th or 16th they're going to release it. I will probably have a stream within the first 1 or 2 days after that of me trying to use the airplane. And trying will be the operative word, because I have not flown the RJ before. I know Aerosoft had it for the FSX P3D platform. I just never really... It's not that I didn't want it. It's more just a budgetary limitation, if you will. I just never felt like... My hangar is big enough. I have so many airplanes in my hangar already that I'm flying that I'm not... that I never really felt a pressing need to add the RJ to my repertoire. but given that it is going to be the first really decent level airplane that's going to be added to the Microsoft Flight Simulator platform, that to me is a given. I want to fly some jets. I want to fly some real flights in the CRJ. I've never really flown the CRJ, so the CRJ is going to be it's going to be a brand new thing to me. I've read Aerosoft released Volume 1 of their manual, and I've read that. And that is enough, I think, to get you... It's basically an orientation to the flight deck and a little bit of a guidance to their EFB and a couple other things. So it's a very rudimentary introduction, but at least I have some sense of what the airplane, how the flight deck is laid out in that airplane. But I'm super excited for it at the end of the day. I really am, because as much as I've enjoyed this P3D platform, and it really is a good platform in a lot of ways, the scenery is just disappointing. And having seen what Microsoft Flight Simulator can do, this scenery is really terribly disappointing. And it's good. I mean, Orbex has done great things with the limitations of the platform they have and the amount of data that you can have. You know, the way Microsoft approached generating the world is just a completely different approach than was done in past iterations of Flight Simulator. And I think that's fairly obvious and self-evident, but it just creates such an immersive experience. I was flying it last night, and between not just the scenery itself, which is great. I mean, you can fly over and you can see, hey, look, there's a ski resort down there. Look, there's baseball diamonds out behind that school. You can see like that level of detail, maybe not from 30,000 feet, but definitely from 5,000 or 10,000 feet. You can see that level of detail, but then combine that with some absolutely fantastic lighting. I was flying at dusk, and you just have the sun slowly setting over the mountains, and the whole hue of the sky just starts to turn orange, and everything out there is just got that nice orange glow to it. Looks really good. Yeah, I'll answer the questions in a little bit. I just want to finish my rant on the CRJ, but I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a great thing to get a high-level aircraft into Microsoft Flight Simulator with some great scenery that they have available there, and I think this is going to really be the dawn of the age of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it's really been good to this date, but it's been strictly a VFR sim, and it's great for VFR. I did VFR yesterday, and I just literally was able to look at the charts on SkyVector and look out the window, and I could navigate from one place to another with a remarkable level of precision, because the world in Microsoft Flight Simulator is so accurate that the charts really look like the world. You know, every road that exists is in the real world is in the scenery because of the satellite imagery. All the landmarks that you would expect to see are there. You can see them, you can find them, and you can fly with them, which is just great. So it's going to be fantastic to have that in there. I'm going to do a live stream within the first couple days anyways, and not so much, it's the biggest thing is going to be me just finding the time to do it. But as soon as I do have that block of time, I already have the flight planned out that I'm going to do. I'm going to use a couple of payware sceneries right now. So the flight is going to be planned. I'm going to do Portland down to Las Vegas. It's about a 2 and a bit hour flight, which is great because that's going to give me enough time to kind of get the airplane running, get up and cruise, be able to explore it a little bit, have plenty of time to set up the arrival for what it will be for me, a new airplane, a new FMS, just learning new things. So it's probably going to be a bit of a gong show. So you know, if you want to tune in for that stream, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a gong show because, like I said, it's a new type, but come and learn with me and see if it's worthwhile for you guys as well. I think Aerosoft is going to make a ton of money on this. And it's interesting because Aerosoft commented, the developer Mathis commented a little while ago about the future direction of the flight simulation hobby and why P3D it's not dead, but it's dying very quickly, and the real reason is that developers are not going to support it because the customers are not supporting it. People enjoy flying it still because it's a good platform, but one thing he said is that the sales, as soon as Microsoft announced the release date of Microsoft Flight Simulator, the sales of P3D just flatlined. People just stopped spending money in that platform altogether, and the only way now these developers are going to get revenue is to develop for the new platform. People stopped, and it's not to say nobody spent money, but very little money relative to what was being spent before has been spent in the P3D platform since Microsoft Flight Simulator released. So the customers, as much as the developers, are dictating the direction of the hobby, and the customers are saying, we want Microsoft Flight Simulator. They want to be in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So that's where the money is, and the developers, you know, most of them are they're trying to make a living out of it. You know, they love what they do, and they're trying to make a living out of it. So they're going to move in the direction of where people are willing to spend the money again. So that's where Microsoft Flight Simulator comes in. So Aerosoft is probably going to make a ton of money on the RJ just by being first to market. That is going to be huge because people have been just itching to get their hands on something. You know, like I see it on the VATSIM network. There are tons and tons of people flying Microsoft Flight Simulator. The most common aircraft types you see on the VATSIM network these days. Actually, the 777 got a real boost, you know, 2 weeks ago when PMDG launched finally their update to the 777. There's been a real boost to 777 traffic since then. But just before that, the #1 airplane flying on VATSIM was A320s, and a lot of the people were flying the A320neo in the fly-by-wire adaptation of it. That was big. Another big one was the Citation CJ4, the C25C. You see a ton of Citation CJ4 suddenly bombing around the VATSIM network, and you see a ton of TBMs. Tons of TBMs bombing around. Those are 3 of the most common types now on VATSIM. People are really, they're using Microsoft Flight Simulator, even if it's not great. They're trying to make the most of it. So now that they're going to have a real quality airplane, Aerosoft is going to sell thousands of copies on day one, if not 10,000 copies on day one, as people are just going to want to get in there. And in the VATSIM network, you're going to see that the list of RJs, it's just going to be like all RJs everywhere for starting middle of March, just going every which way as people try to make the most of this new platform and a great airplane in this platform. And I will be one of the people on there. I don't know if I'll get the expansion pack necessarily, but I definitely will be hopping into the RJ 550, the RJ 700 to get some real world to get some real experience with a real good airplane, with a real good FMC. And I will say I tried out the A3 the fly-by-wire A320, and it's a good airplane. It's got a ways to go, and I'm not meaning that as a critique. I'm meaning it just as it's a work in progress. There's still tons of stuff that obviously they want to do and they want to implement, but already it's gotten so much better. The FMS is more robust. You can change things, and the changes work. Whereas with the default airplane, if you try to change something in the flight plan halfway through the flight, it usually just breaks the flight plan. So definitely the FMC is getting better. The VNAV doesn't work yet, but that's a complicated system to try and program in. So I'll give them lots of time to do that. I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to be critical. I think where they are, and just having had like 6 months of all volunteers working on this already, they're doing well. But people are itching for this. So we'll see. Hopefully the Aerosoft airplane works. So the worst thing that could happen is if there's a lot of deal-breaking bugs in it right now. Could give Aerosoft a real black eye because people are just chomping at the bit to get on this airplane. All right. So I'll go back to the question. Unusual Ben asked if I've flown much in real life other than passenger aircraft. Yeah. I have about 8,000 hours in airplanes now, I think. So yeah, I have flown in real life quite a bit. So yeah, you can feel free to tap my knowledge. I haven't flown a whole wide variety of aircraft types. 2/3 of my time has been on 2 different aircraft types. I've probably flown 5,000 hours on just 2 types. Before that, I had flown probably a dozen or so different other types, but then, yeah, when you get in the airline business, you can kind of focus on one type for a long time. So, yeah, feel free to crack open my skull and ask questions about the industry, and I'll do my best to answer them. Jim Bob is me, said he wished Microsoft had incorporated VFR charts into the sim. Yeah, I feel you on that. And the only thing I'll throw out there as a devil's advocate is I wonder how much it would cost them to work in real VFR charts. Because you know, the FAA does publish a lot of their stuff online now, and a lot of organizations don't too. So the first problem with trying to work VFR charts into the sim is that a lot of places don't publish their VFR charts in a digital form still. A lot of countries around the world, the only way to get a VFR chart is to go and order a hard copy, to order a paper map from from the agency of that country, or from a store even in that country, but a lot of places don't even publish still digital versions. So I think the first problem is having a data source that's accurate and reliable, and the second thing would also be the cost too. I believe the FAA charges other companies that want to get direct copies of their digital data for redistribution. I don't know how much it is. I don't know. I mean, Microsoft probably has gotten a lot of revenue out of Microsoft Flight Simulator to date, but as an ongoing cost to keep those VFR charts in there, you have to ask what it would cost. And outside of the US, there's not a lot of great digital distribution of charts. We kind of take it for granted in the US that the VFR charts are there, but a lot of other parts of the world, the VFR data is not there, even there in a digital form. It doesn't even exist in the digital format, not that it's even an option that Microsoft could consider. So Isakata from Santiago, Chile, welcome. Thank you for watching the channel. We're just trying to talk a little bit about anything related to aviation. Right now we're just talking about a little bit about Microsoft Flight Simulator because I brought it up, but Unusual Bend asks for which platforms is the CRJ releasing. Well, this iteration of the CRJ is just for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Aerosoft has already released 2 versions of the CRJ for the FSX and P3D platforms. So if you want to go fly it now and you have FSX and P3D, you can go out there and buy it right now, but I think it's about the same price as the new one. One thing that they did say, and I was looking for this to see what they would say, is would they offer a discount to existing customers? And at the end of the day, they said no. And the reasoning behind that was because of the amount of development that went into the new version of the CRJ. It's almost a new airplane from the ground up. So let's see here, these 700, 900, yeah. So the previous version was 42 euros, and the new version is going to be another 42 euros. So yeah, if you can buy the version for FSX and P3D. However, the new version will not cover that old stuff. They're 2 completely separate aircraft, two completely separate products. It's the same airplane, but 2 completely separate products. Just because of the amount of time that Aerosoft had to invest in this new one. And good on Aerosoft too for investing the time, because one thing they've done through investing all this time and effort with Aerosoft, or with their CRJ, is they have pushed Microsoft and Asobo a lot. I guess I really should say Asobo. They pushed Asobo to improve their SDK to the point where they can release this. Again, I've read a whole bunch of posts from Mathis in the last little while, but again, he wrote that they were literally on the phone or in contact with Asobo every single day almost throughout the development of the RJ here, talking about what needed to be added, what was working, what was buggy, what wasn't documented, just pushing Asobo really hard to get their SDK up to a level where then Aerosoft could create this airplane and release it. And it's not perfect yet. There's apparently a few things that are not working yet in the RJ because Flight Simulator doesn't support them yet. But it's not like the development will stop on release day. The development will continue, and as Microsoft continues to improve their SDK, then more functionality will come to the RJ. The cost of the new CRJ, I believe, is going to be 42 euros. For the base pack. So it's 2 packages. The first package is the CRJ 550 and the CRJ 700. That's the base pack. And then I'm just trying to find the information here. That is 42 euros. That I know for sure. I'm trying to find the article about it here. No, not that. Let's see here. Hold on. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to find the article here to find the price for you. So the CRJ 900 and 1000 were going to be the next add-ons, and I can't find it now. I think it was like another 20 euros. So 42 euros, I think, for the base pack, and then something along the lines of 20 euros for the... I can't find it now. I can't find it. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, I know the base pack is 42 euros because that's definitely what I'm going to be on. That's going to have the CRJ 550 and the CRJ 700 in it. And then the expansion pack would be the 900 and 1000 series CRJs. And I think it's about 20 additional euros. So it's not cheap. I will say I did like most things about Aerosoft's Airbus products. I'm pretty impressed with their Aerosoft for P3D products. So like I said, I'm going into this, I think, with my eyes open. I know it's not going to be a PMDG level. Everything can break. It's 100% perfect, and that's probably an exaggeration. But you know what I mean. It's not that PMDG level. It's a mid-level airplane. It's not a really cheap Mickey Mouse airplane. The switches should all do everything they're supposed to do. Everything should be pretty functional. The FMS is going to be pretty advanced, but it's not going to have, you know, the ultimate systems depth where, you know, the voltages and amperages change as you turn on individual switches. It's not quite to the level of PMDG, but certainly for getting out there and making holes in the sky and flying around and experiencing the world in Microsoft Flight Simulator with an airliner, it's gonna really scratch that itch for a lot of people. So I think Aerosoft's gonna make a ton of money just for being first to market. I think that's the first thing. They're gonna make a ton of money just for being the first ones out there. People are gonna fly the pants on this RJ. PMDG still 6 to 9 months away from releasing anything for this platform because they, I think, want an even higher level of capability within the platform that Asobo just hasn't baked in there yet. They're probably hassling them a lot, but haven't baked it in there yet. And then it's a bit of a shame, but I haven't heard too much from any of the other developers. It seems like Aerosoft and PMDG are the only ones who are really hardcore working on this new platform, and it's a bit of a shame. A lot of other developers have shown an interest in it. Other ones that I would like to see come to this platform, I would like to see Leonardo get the Mad Dog on the Flight Simulator platform. I think it would be a beautiful airplane with the lighting effects they have in there. Imagine, you know, the MD-80 with the full polished aluminum American Airlines paint job in the setting sun in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It would just be absolutely beautiful to see. The other one, of course, that comes to mind as well is, and I think it's going to be a while, is a Majestic's Dash 8 would also be a great airplane. Just because it's a little bit slower, a little bit lower, you tend to get a little bit more benefit from the scenery. But that's I feel like that's going to be a long time because Majestic strikes me, and I don't know this for a fact, but Majestic strikes me as a very small development studio. Not one that there's a lot of people working on it. So I don't see them spending... It's not that they don't want to, but developing an airplane for a new platform and would pretty much they're going to have to start from the ground up again. I think with the Dash 8, they'll have to take all their pictures and drawings and everything, but start right from the ground up again to redesign for this platform, and that takes a long time. So I want the Dash 8. I would love to see the Dash 8 in that platform. I think it's going to be a long time. Anybody else have any other suggestions on what airplanes you'd like to see in the Microsoft Flight Simulator platform, like a good quality, high-level airplane? You know, some business jets are also fun. One that surprised me a little bit, and I think is perfect for VFR flying as well as doing some IFR stuff, would be something like the PC-12. The King Air is in there, I guess, and the King Air is very nice. The PC-12 would be a good one as well. Trying to think what other airplanes do I really enjoy on the P3D platform that they don't have in there. I mean, really, the 737 and the 320 are kind of the workhorses. So if you can get those on the platform, that's 50% of the world's airline fleet right there. The Embraers, actually, those are some decent regional jets as well. The Wright Flyer. I remember trying to fly that thing. I was never able to do it very well. That thing was a nightmare to fly, I think, in the real world. Very inherently unstable airplane, so you need a lot of input. Yeah, I'm just trying to think what other airplanes would I like to see. Good quality airplanes that we had in Microsoft Flight Simulator, or not in the FSX P3D world that could be and should be brought in. And I don't even know. The Dash 8, like I said, is high on my list. You know, the Embraers are some really nice modern regional jets, a lot like an Airbus. Not quite to the level of an Airbus, but a lot like an Airbus in a lot of ways. Those would be fun, relatively simple airplanes to fly compared to, you know, something like the 737. I don't know what else. I can't think of too many other airplanes, really. I mean, yeah, if you get... if you get the PMDG line and Aerosoft to bring the Airbuses as well, I think those will be the big ones. And the funny thing is that Aerosoft, I think, made a lot of money off the Airbuses. I don't know if they're going to make as much in the Microsoft Flight Simulator platform with the competition from the fly-by-wire system. You know, if the fly-by-wire aircraft is just as good as the Aerosoft aircraft, why would you pay for the Aerosoft aircraft? And I'm not trying to belittle the developers, but unfortunately, with fly-by-wire making that airplane already and already being out there, having it in front of people, Aerosoft's going to have an uphill battle trying to sell copies of their Airbus. What aircraft have I flown in real life in my 8,000 hours? Well, I started off with you know, the typical flight training. Anyways, I spent a couple hundred hours in the 150. Spent a little bit of time in the 172, the Cherokee. Also did some training in the Bonanza, the Baron, and the Piper Seminole. Just trying to think beyond that. And the Cessna 182. Then I spent a couple hundred hours bombing around in a Pilatus before I moved on to the Meridian, the Piper Meridian. I spent probably about 400 or 500 hours in that. I put about 50 hours into the Cessna Conquest. I think I did 2 flights in the Cessna 340. Did a flight in the King Air 90. Flown in the Lake Buck. That was kind of fun. Very low sitting in that thing. I remember that. It's like we were very low to the ground in the Lake Buck. And then eventually moved into the airline business, and I flew the Dash 8 initially, the Q400 initially, and then I moved on to the E175, which is between the Dash 8 and the E175 account for probably over 5,000 hours of my 8,000 hours of flying time. And that's one reason why I would like to see an Embraer in any of these good platforms, but in Microsoft Flight Simulator especially, is there's never been a good quality Embraer. Feel Air had one. I flew it. I think it was overpriced even for what they gave you. It sort of did the job, but it was very crash happy. I stopped flying it because it often crashed. It crashed with the sim, and it was just it was frustrating, very frustrating. So, you know, it looked right. It looked okay. It was very poor quality flight deck as well. I'll say it was very low quality virtual flight deck in there too. So I was never very impressed with it. It sort of worked, but it was not great. The wing, I think the wing warping made the right flyer inherently unstable, and key reason the design never took off. Yeah, wing warping especially, like, to me, you know, and back then, of course, making things with fabric, things are a little more flexible. It didn't seem like a futuristic design so much. You know, creating something that bends repetitively is going to introduce stress, especially into metal. Having a point where it's designed to bend, having a hinge, makes things makes the wear points more predictable. With wing warping, I look at like the long range longevity of it, and I would think that, yeah, you're not going to get very good longevity out of something that just sort of flexes and bends repeatedly. You know, and you're not talking about like once or twice a flight. You're talking about dozens and maybe 100 times per flight. You'll flex the ailerons back and forth each way. So I look at that from a material wear standpoint and think to myself, that's not going to last all that long. You know, and when you're designing airplanes just for the, you know, in the beginning to just last a couple of flights and just at least try to prove the concept, okay, then wing warping's a fine concept. But in the long run, it didn't strike me as a viable concept from a material fatigue standpoint. quickly plug in my telephone here, which is watching, I'm just watching the chat here on my mobile device, and I just realized that it's not plugged in and it's almost out of batteries. Give me 1 second, I'm just pulling out my charging cord here, which is tied in 3 knots for some reason. There we go. There we go. Now it won't discharge. And off we go. How are we doing now? Just gonna bring this over and see where we are on the live map now, just see how our progress is going. I think we're out of Atlanta's airspace, and I think we're probably into Memphis airspace by now. I'll bring up V-Pilot here, or VATSIM. Not quite out of Atlanta yet, almost. But yeah, so we're somewhere over Alabama right now, just southwest of Birmingham. Oh, right here. So this is Birmingham right here. We're getting there slowly. We still got a long way to go, though. That is a long flight. Getting some ATC online in North America now, but not a whole ton yet. What else was I going to talk about? The one other topic I had to talk about, which is completely unrelated to aviation, other than the fact that we just left Orlando, but I do have to say that I went to Disney World, let's see, 2.5 years ago, I guess now, and I have to say that that is truly one of the best vacation spots in the world. And I won't say it's the best or it's the only good one, but it's definitely one of the best. Certainly as far as resort vacations go, it's probably the best. Just the effort that Disney goes through to make the whole experience painless, and you pay for that privilege. But I will have to say that although it was definitely the most expensive vacation I ever had, I will say that it was worth every penny we spent. It was also I went as a family, and it was one of the best experiences I had as a family. Disney has spent years mastering the art of extracting as much money as possible from your wallet, but providing a memorable experience while they do it, which I think is one of the keys to their business model too, is that they don't want you to come back once, they want you to come back again. I have, you know, when I was a kid, I've only been to Disney World a few times. I went when I was a kid once, and it was sort of a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal for my family, and I get it because of the amount of money that you spend. It's not something you can afford to do on a regular basis unless you're particularly well off. But it also, of course, distracts you from seeing other parts of the world. So I wouldn't want to necessarily say I should only go on vacation to Disney, but it's definitely a worthwhile experience to definitely do once. And even as an adult, I've now been to Disney World 3 times. I went once as a kid. I went once as a young adult. I was in my late 20s, I think, and I went before I had kids, just with another couple. And I would not have thought, my impression at the time was, of course, Disney World is a place for kids. I would never have thought that we would have that much fun as adults, but really there's a lot of good rides and a lot of good attractions for adults. So I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, and we actually had a ton of fun going as adults. And people think of it as a place just for kids. It's not just a place for kids. If you have the opportunity to go, even as an adult, just with a couple of friends, it can be a lot of fun. There's tons of good thrill rides. The thrill rides are really quite good. You know, you get lots of different food. There's lots of different things adults can do at Disney World as well. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it as a family vacation too, and that's one thing that Disney has done so well, is they've made something for pretty much everyone. It's not a theme park that's just for kids. It's not a theme park that's made just for adults. It really kind of has something for all the different age groups, from 1 up to 100. You can find something to do with almost every age group that'll keep people entertained. Sometimes with younger kids, you're kind of restricted to the younger rides, and then that becomes a bit of an issue if you don't have, if you don't get to get on a few of the thrill rides yourself as an adult. But yeah, they've done a very good job of making things appeal to people of multiple ages. You know, when you go there, you've got to just also just sort of allow yourself to have fun too. That's the other thing. You know, you can go as an adult and you can be grumpy about going on all the kids' rides and say this is stupid and you know, childish, or you can go and appreciate what they've done. You know, and they've done an excellent job of hiding how they do things. The magic behind the scenes, they do an excellent job. And Jimbo says Disney's almost like a cult. They suck you in as a kid. Yeah, they do. They've done. There is a brand that has done an excellent job managing its brand, selling itself to various people, and I will say that I'm not a huge part of the cult of Disney, but I do believe they put out good products for kids. As a parent, I have no problem, you know, setting my kids down with a Disney movie. I know that Disney's going to put together a good wholesome movie. And yeah, like I would not. What blows my mind is the people who go there every year or multiple times a year, and the amount of money they must spend on Disney vacations to go there every year and multiple times a year. I spent a lot of money on my Disney vacation. I stayed at one of the cheapest resorts, one of the cheapest hotels on the resort, and I still spent a ton of money. The amount of money you can spend at the high-end hotels at Disney is absolutely ridiculous. You can't even fathom how much some people spend on their Disney vacations, and they go every year. Yeah, they really do suck a lot of people in. For myself, I don't plan on going back anytime soon. I would like to go back because, again, it was a really great experience. I really had a lot of fun. I can see myself going back again in 5 to 8 years when my children are teenagers and they're going to get a very different experience at the park and probably go out there and get some time and be responsible enough that they can go off on their own and do their own thing and meet up afterwards. I can see myself going and doing that family vacation as well. I don't see myself going every year. That would just blows my mind, because then the other thing too is that you're not going other places, and I absolutely enjoy taking my family other places as well. It's not that I just want to go to Disney, but if anyone's ever thinking about it, it's a lot of money, but one thing about Disney is that they give you the value for your money. And the case in point that I used was just the level of customer service there. We went into the cafeteria at our hotel, and we asked one of the people behind the counter about a certain dessert that we heard about that was available in the Magic Kingdom, and asked him, can you get it anywhere else? And he says, you know, I don't know the answer. This is what we have here. And, you know, didn't think much of it. That was kind of the standard answer you would expect from somebody who's, you know, he's an employee. He's not doesn't run the place. He's not a concierge. Just an employee working at the cafeteria. Wouldn't expect like a huge amount of answer or anything on that. But then what blew me away was then, like 15-20 minutes later, we're sitting outside on the patio just enjoying our snack, and the same guy came back out, and he had answers. He's like, I went to talk to some people, and they said, yeah, you can only get that at 2 places. It's only in the Magic Kingdom. It's this place and that place. We have this. It's kind of similar, but it's not quite the same. And you know, I brought you one of these here for free anyways, just to try out, and you can come back and get another one if you want, or you know, or wait till you get the Magic Kingdom. And that just blew me away. You know, it wasn't even just the freebie. It was the fact that the guy went to the effort. You know, 15-20 minutes later, he went, in the interim, he'd gone to find an answer to that question that we asked. And then he went out of his way to come and find us and give us the answer. And that's the kind of customer service that is missing in so much of the world today. Most companies, they don't give a single... I want to use some curse words about, you know... They just don't give a shit about their customers. They just want the money, and they'll do anything to get the money, and they don't care at all about the customer. And to deal with a company that has that level of customer service, where we will try our best to make you to ensure that you have an enjoyable time. You know, they didn't charge anything extra for the information. He brought a free sample just for us to try out, because just to build that experience. I was just blown away by that. So if you're ever thinking about Disney, it's a fantastic vacation. It was one of the best vacations I ever went on. It was expensive, but it was very much worth the price. I got my money's worth out of that vacation, that's for sure. Disney got their money's worth out of me, but they definitely provide a total experience that's very flawless, very pain-free. I had no complaints about the whole week. The worst complaint I had about the whole week wasn't anything to do with Disney, but on the night we arrived, we were trying to find a grocery store, and the first one we found happened to close, and we had to rush to find another one. before it closed that evening, and that was probably the biggest problem the whole week. We were there for a week, and it was just a pain-free experience. It was great. Okay, so unusual bend. When I found searching for a real pilot that's using sims, yet to invest in current sims. Pilot, which do you like for realism and which for overall if different? Which sims do I like? Alright, well, I'll be upfront. First of all, I have only had a very, very limited exposure to X-Plane. I've used it a few times. I liked it, but I've never really gotten into it. P3D is a really good platform because of the diversity of software and add-ons available for the platform. It's a really good platform. It's not perfect. The scenery is not always great, especially the in-between scenery. It's somewhat generic, somewhat dated, especially given today's processor power and the amount of information available, as Microsoft Flight Simulator has shown us. But in terms of the flexibility of the platform, the number of airplanes, the overall maturity of the platform, P3D is great. It's a bit expensive, I will certainly grant that, but it's a very mature, stable platform. People know what it can do very well, and like I said, there's tons and tons of add-ons for it now. So it's a really good platform. And again, realism comes down to what are you trying to do with the platform as well too. Because again, talking about P3D, if your head is in here most of the time, it's a very realistic platform. The airplanes that have been created, the third-party airplanes that have been created, are incredibly realistic. The default scenery outside sucks, and this is not default actually, this is Orbex, and it's okay, but like the default airports, they really kind of suck. If you're willing to spend money on add-on airports and add-ons, then you know, P3D is a good platform. But as I said before in my Aerosoft rant, I think it's slowly dying. I don't think it's dead yet. But it's gonna die a slow death. It's gonna slowly lose popularity, and the developers are gonna stop spending as much time and money on it because the money won't be there. They're gonna chase the money, unfortunately. But if they're trying to make a living, you have to, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a bit of a realist, a pragmatist. At the end of the day, if you're trying to make a living out of making add-ons, you have to be making add-ons for the people who are gonna buy them. So, you know, as it again depends on if you're primarily concerned with trying to have a very realistic flight model, realistic systems. I would say at this point in time, P3D is the platform still for you. Microsoft Flight Simulator is the future, but it's not a mature platform yet. There's still a lot of problems with it. There's still a lot of errors with it. The GA airplanes generally fly fairly nicely on Microsoft Flight Simulator, and even the default airplanes are not bad. They do the basics. You can turn on the electrical system, start the airplane. It does all that sort of stuff. They're still somewhat rudimentary a little bit. The flight model is not ideal, but I'll say this, the overall impact of the platform is really good. When you combine what are reasonable models with some absolutely phenomenal scenery, some absolutely phenomenal environmental and atmospheric effects, you end up with a very, very good overall package. And that's what Microsoft Flight Simulator is right now. Overall, it's a very good package. If you're kind of interested in the experience of flight, I think Microsoft Flight Simulator is the better package now because of the airplanes handle well enough, but then it's also just the whole sensation outside of the airplane. You can actually check it out here on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. But I did my first flight back in August on the Microsoft Flight Simulator platform, and I just remember just the sensation that first time that I grabbed the controls and rotated. I was just in a Cessna 150. I was basically trying to sort of recapture a little bit of my flight training days, and I just took off in the Cessna 150, and the overall effect as you kind of lift it off the runway, but there's so much detail on either side of you, there's so many three-dimensional trees and buildings on either side of you as you are rotating. The overall effect I got from it was very almost jaw-dropping how good it felt. I obviously didn't have my seat actually moving, but in terms of the visuals feeding into my brain, I said this feels like the real thing more than any simulator I've seen to date. As I've spent more time with it, I have seen, of course, the limitations and the issues and stuff in the airplanes, but my first impression of it was wow. Just wow over how close it came to simulating that real experience. So if you want to get like a very realistic experience as a pilot of general aviation aircraft and see some scenery down low, I recommend the Microsoft Flight Simulator platform. I think it's worth the money. Now, one thing where it may not be worth the money is the extra packs, the deluxe and the ultimate editions, or whatever they're called. I ended up going with the biggest package because it had a lot of good airports in it. It had some good airplanes in it. At the end of the day, I'm not totally impressed with the Asobos with their detailed airports, their feature airports, or whatever you want to call them, that they supposedly put extra detail into. Some of them look really quite nice, but some of them really don't. Some of them they're a little better than default. They obviously have some custom buildings put in there, but that's about the end of it. So some of them are very detailed. Some of them have a few custom buildings, and that's it. And that's called a featured airport. So it's very kind of hit or miss on that. I think I may have overreached and overspent by buying the ultimate package. I kind of have a little bit of the buyer's remorse there, because it just their feature airports are still not as good as some of the extra payware add-on airports. But in terms of the overall package, again, I think Microsoft Flight Simulator is the future. It's going to take quite a few years before there's enough stability to the platform, enough of the bugs worked out that it's going to really be a solid platform for doing airline flying and flying in a lot of high-end airplanes. But in terms of getting that general aviation feel, it feels great. But if you're more thinking you're going to be doing a lot of airline flying, you want to get the 737 out, the 747, I think the P3D is the platform to go with. I think there's still quite a lot of years left of life in it. And there's a lot of add-ons if you don't mind spending the extra money on add-ons. No, the featured airports in the base package, what they've done is there's more featured airports in the additional packages. So it's not that the featured airports change the detail level. It's that in each package there's a different set of featured airports available. So the base package, I think, has about 20 featured airports. The mid-level package has, I think, that 20 plus about another 8, and then the high-level package has those 28 plus like another 6 or 8 airports. So it's not the level of detail, it's how many airports have that supposed featured level of detail. And again, it varies. I did London Heathrow, and London Heathrow looked really quite good, but then I went to Toronto City Centre, and Toronto City Centre was very rudimentary, I think was the best word. There were custom buildings, but it did not look... it really didn't capture the feel of that airport as much. So it's kind of, their featured airports, I think, are kind of hit or miss. Some of them are really quite well done, and some of them are kind of not a whole lot better than default, and some of them were not worth the extra money. It adds to the amount of featured airports. All airports in the world are in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Every airport that is out there is in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but some of them are just default airports. So they've just been procedurally generated. The runways are just simply generated based on mountains of aeronautical data. The taxiways and aprons, they're just automatically generated from satellite data. The buildings are again generated from satellite data, so they're not necessarily realistic. Yeah, so all the airports are out there in the world of Microsoft Flight Simulator. The featured airports just have like custom buildings made, so the buildings actually look like the real world buildings. They'll be custom made, they'll have custom textures on the outside so that they resemble the real world buildings. The non-featured airports are generally mostly well done. The algorithms that Asobo has used to generate them have been pretty good, but you'll find mistakes here and there. You'll find things like a a taxiway that was missed by the algorithm, and so it ends up being grass. You'll see it's like a different color grass because the satellite image was a different color, but it didn't recognize it as pavement, so you'll see it as like a different color grass. So yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, do you need those? The other thing too is that the different packages have different airplanes as well. So the extra packages will have a few extra airplanes. I would look more at the airplanes when deciding if you want to get the extra packages. I think those are the more worthwhile investment, if you will. They're what make the bigger packages more worth it. If you want those particular airplanes, then go for the upgrade packages. If you don't want those particular airplanes, then stick with the base package. Because there's going to be payware scenery out there for a lot of these airports, and in a lot of cases the payware is going to be better than what Asobo's done anyways, so you don't need those featured airports as much, I think. And it's up to you. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, that's just it. If none of those airports really interest you, then it's probably not worth spending the extra money on it. Or if the extra airplanes really don't interest you, then you don't need it. I'm trying to remember what's in the various packages. It's been a while since I looked at it. Just trying to remember here what's in the different versions here. Here it is, if I can get this to pop out for me here. So airplanes, the base model comes with a lot of different stuff. The deluxe version adds the Diamond 20, 40, the Baron 58, the Cessna 152, 172. See, those airplanes right there were pretty. Those are the ones I probably fly the most, especially the Cessnas and the Beach Baron. I like the Beach Baron; it's a nice airplane as well. So I definitely would have gone for the deluxe package. The premium package includes the Dreamliner, the Cirrus SR22, the Citation Longitude, the Shock Ultra. The premium, probably not almost worth it. The 87's not a bad airplane to have. You do have the 47 if you want to do long hauling, though, included in the base version. The Cirrus is probably one of the more interesting airplanes in that premium package, but the premium package, the airplanes almost aren't worth it. I'd say the deluxe package, the Cessna 150, 172, the Beach Baron, those make the deluxe package, the medium range package, worth it. In terms of airports, the deluxe package adds, on top of the base, adds Schiphol, Cairo, Cape Town, Chicago O'Hare, and Madrid in Spain. And then the ultimate package also adds Denver, Dubai, Frankfurt, Heathrow, and San Francisco. And those ones in the premium package right there, they sound like, 5 airports that everybody's going to want to friggin' have. But again, it wasn't so. Yeah, and this is the thing with Microsoft Flight Simulator. The GA airplanes are pretty good. They're not perfect, but they're not too bad. I find that they can be a little bit squirrely near the runway sometimes. Especially the Beach Baron, I find it tends to get very squirrely on final approach. But the airliners are not terribly good. They're okay. They kind of get the job done, but they're not fantastic models. The handling characteristics of airliners, very different. And this is the thing, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, like you're trying to simulate so many different aerodynamics in one package, and the way GA airplanes fly is very different from the way airliners fly. And you really can't use the same flight model for both. They're very different animals, the way they're designed and the way they handle. So you can't use the same model. So if you try to just simply scale up the GA model to an airline level, you're going to end up with some weird flight characteristics that are not very realistic. And I think that's the case. So they're not terrible airplanes, but if you're interested in like having a realistic experience flying an airliner, then Microsoft Flight Simulator's default airplanes are not going to do it for you. And that's where the RJ is going to come in, and people are going to start flying like crazy because they're going to want that experience. That's Memphis down over there. So we're almost at our first step climb here. Alright, we are getting there. How are we doing now? We've been airborne for quite a while now. 20:45. We still got 4 hours to go. Oh, this is a long stream. again. We are halfway through Memphis airspace. Nothing much happening yet. Hoping as the day wears on, we will eventually get some ATC here. I can't speak to that for sure, if the A320 in Microsoft Flight Simulator is really accurate or not. I feel like it's not a bad rendition. Again, it's not easy to do, because these airliners especially are very, very complicated machines. You know, these FMCs probably have as much power as your phone does in them, which is to say your phone's a pretty powerful computer. So now imagine trying to put 2 FMCs plus a whole bunch of other computer systems on top of the fact you're running a flight model and a scenery model in your computer, and there's a lot of stuff going on in an airplane. There's got to be some simplifications when you're simulating an airliner in order to make it run on your computer without bringing your computer down to its knees. So I accept that there inherently has to be some simplifications, but in the default versions they tend to take the simplification pretty far to give it some mass appeal, a little bit farther than I would like to take it. So yeah, I've flown the A320 around in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's usable. It's not great, but it's definitely usable. But I think with the fly-by-wire project, if you haven't seen that, search for fly-by-wire. But they are fly-by-wire A3NX, I think. But they're developing a layer that you put in the sim on top of the default 320 that adds a much more realistic, that makes the 320 much more realistic to fly. If you've never seen it, I've used it now, and it's definitely improves upon the base airplane quite a bit. It adds a lot of functionality. The thing is, there's a lot of functionality missing even in the base A320. Like the various ECAM screens where you can bring up your fuel system and your hydraulic system and air conditioning system and all those systems. Almost none of those pages work in the default 320, so it's very rudimentary. It'll get you from point A to point B, but don't try to reprogram the FMS en route either, because that'll probably screw up as well. Their FMS is also very simplistic and not terribly realistic. So, again, if you buy Microsoft Flight Simulator and install the fly-by-wire A3NX package on top of Microsoft Flight Simulator, it immediately transforms it to a much more usable airplane. You know, at the end of the day, I wasn't expecting great things. And here's the thing with Microsoft Flight Simulator, I looked at it this way: you're not buying it for the airliners. You're not buying that package to have a realistic experience in the airliners. You're buying that package mostly for the world that you operate in. That's the way I think it's best to look at Microsoft Flight Simulator. And with all of these simulators, it's basically the same basic truth. It provides a platform that you get to operate within. Over time, you'll get more and more add-ons that will build upon that and make it much more realistic. The GA airplanes, yes, you can operate them, and they're okay, and they're decent for getting a decent flight by, but they're not the most realistic in the world. But they're definitely decent. But it's the scenery. It's the scenery. It's the environmental effects. It blows me away sometimes when I see these daytime, nighttime sceneries. Like I said, like the sunset yesterday, and everything took on this orange hue. You know, you see the shadows of the mountains cast for miles down, downrange of the mountains. The whole effect is very nice. And that's one thing that strikes me about that platform. I really do believe that those guys spent a lot of time in airplanes. So the Asobo developers, and they said it in their developer Q&As at some point, that the vast majority of people in the studio, they all got chances to go up in airplanes, but the vast majority of them ended up going and getting pilot licenses. They ended up enjoying it so much that they went and they spent a lot of time in airplanes getting pilot licenses because they enjoyed the experience. But doing that gave them a real insight into what makes it feel real. And I think that's something that's been missing in previous iterations. Is for some reason there's a feeling that you get in Microsoft Flight Simulator, that the way the scenery and the environment come together, it makes it creates a very realistic impression. It's not perfect, and obviously you don't have the sense of motion and all that from flying, but the overall visual effect is very impactful. It's very cohesive too. You know, you look out here sometimes and you see like the breaks in the patterns. The patterns become very obvious in here because it's all satellite imagery, and it's very cohesive. The other thing too you'll notice in the P3D level world is that oftentimes around airports you'll notice that the terrain color of the images that they used for the grass around the airport doesn't match the rest of the surrounding terrain. And that's something that Microsoft really worked out well, is that they really blend the colors well so that things don't stand out. Everything's got the same color, the same tone to it. You know, if you look in the P3D world and try to spot an airport, you can usually spot it pretty easily because it kind of stands out as a little bit different color. And in the Microsoft Flight Simulator world, like, you're trying to spot these airports out there, they're hard to spot because they blend in with the real scenery, because everything is the tones of everything comes together nicely. But yeah, at the end of the day, Microsoft Flight Simulator will be a base. The scenery there is going to be the base, and if you, again, you want the really realistic experience in terms of just seeing good scenery, I think Microsoft Flight Simulator is the future. But if you want to get into the flight simulation genre now, for the next year, probably at least for the next year or so, I would say the P3D is still the better platform if you want to do airline flying for the next year or so. I think over the course of about a 1 to 2 year time frame, that's when the real good airplanes are going to come out. You're going to see Microsoft Flight Simulator begin to surpass P3D in terms of being usable and realistic. So now we're going to do our step climb to 340, because here we are at Kimmel. If we can get any surplus power out of this airplane here. Oh, there it goes. It's slowly getting there. And I think with that, once we reach our top of climb here, I'm going to take my break here for a little while. I don't know exactly how soon I'm going to come back, honestly. I'm going to probably take a break for at least a half an hour, because I don't think I can talk much more. I have now been talking for, how long has this stream been going on for? Let's see, we are probably about 2 hours and 45 minutes into this stream. Are there advancements coming for which I should just wait to purchase? What do you mean, for Microsoft Flight Simulator or for P3D? Because the biggest problem with P3D right now is that as it is a platform that's kind of fading out, and it is $200 for a license on the P3D platform, it's not a small amount of money for the platform to start with. And yeah. So it takes a, you know, it's a question of, I think it's a question of what are you expecting, and and how much are you going to get out of it too. I'll be honest, I sim way too much. I'm in my sims on an almost daily basis, so I have definitely gotten the money I've spent out of P3D. I've probably already got my money's worth out of Microsoft Flight Simulator. You know, if you're going to be doing it a lot, then you might get your money's worth out of the P3D platform. If you don't think you're going to spend all that much time in it, then I might recommend just stepping right into Microsoft Flight Simulator and being patient and waiting for the more realistic airplanes to come. In terms of advancements beyond Microsoft Flight Simulator, I don't think there's really going to be anything for a long time. This is the generation, this is the sim for the next 10 years. P3D and FSX have basically been around for almost 10 years now as a version, just as a kind of a current version of my current generation of Microsoft Flight Simulator. And Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is the next generation. So that's the sim that's probably going to be over the next 10 years. Is going to be the sim. It's going to be continually updated. They drop the version number from it because they don't expect to release another version every couple of years anymore. They expect, they expect that this is going to be the version for the next 10 years, and they're going to release updates and whatnot with it. But it's going to be the version for 10 more years. I would anticipate. I don't think there's going to be anything much beyond Microsoft Flight Simulator for a while. So at this point, if you're looking to get into it in the long run and invest some money that you think is going to pay off in the long run, I would say you're probably better getting into either the Flight Simulator or the X-Plane platform, because X-Plane has also really come into its own in the last 2 years or so. X-Plane version 11 really has taken off, and it's a really good platform as well. I don't know that much about it. I really don't use it that much, but I have heard good things about it. People like it. There's lots of development happening for that platform as well. But between those two sims, between X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator, those are the two sims that are probably going to be around for the next 10 years. P3D as a platform, probably not so much. It's got a couple of years of life left. If you're somebody who's going to probably use the sim a lot, if you're going to be in the sim couple times a week at least over the next year or two, then P3D may be worth your time and your money. But if you're really kind of a casual guy, then I would probably say go to Microsoft Flight Simulator and just be patient for the good stuff to come, and it will come. And Jimbo says, yeah, the blending of scenery in Microsoft Flight Simulator is great. A lot of times, yeah, I don't spot the runways. The only thing that usually lets me spot the runway is usually when I see the runway lights. Otherwise, like the approach lighting system or something. Otherwise, I often don't catch the airports, yeah, until you're almost on top of them. And that's sometimes the way it is in the real world. So, Microsoft Flight Simulator provides a great challenge for VFR navigation because it's realistic. You know, you're really trying to spot, like, hey, is that the right river? Is that the right road? Oh, look, that's the runway right beyond that. You really are playing that game. It's, you know, it's not like, oh, yeah, I see the ground over there is a different color. That must be the airports. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to take a little break for at least a while now, guys. I'm going to try and come back to the flight deck in about 45 minutes. We've still got, oh, let's see here, 3 hours of flying here. No, 4 hours of flying, sorry. 4 hours of flying still to go to get to Vancouver. It's a long flight. So yeah, I'm going to definitely step out for probably about 45 minutes. I'll come back and check on it. If we get some ATC before then on VATSIM, I may come back before that, but I'm going to step away. Just stop talking for a little while, have a drink, yeah, just get a couple other things done. But I will definitely be back in a little while, guys. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you step away, try and come back a little bit later on. The landing today is going to be at 2047 Zulu. For anyone in the Eastern Time Zone, North America, that's going to be about 3:40. That's 3:47, so just a little before 4 o'clock. So if you're not going to join me again before that, at least come back for the approach phase. And yeah, otherwise I will see you guys in about 45 minutes. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for the conversation. I really enjoy sharing what I know about aviation and the flight simulation platform, and I really wish I could talk more, but my throat is really starting to die now, so I'm going to take a little break. But stick with me, guys, and we will continue again. I'll be back in about 45 minutes.